You're listening to the Film Yappers, the podcast where two film buffs, with too many opinions and just enough credentials, dive deep into the movies you love. The ones you hate, the ones you pretend to have seen, or the ones you are ashamed to admit that you love. From cult classics to fresh releases, they break down what works, what doesn't, and why it matters, one reel at a time. Dr. William Wells, intellectual historian and culture critic, is joined by his co-host and independent filmmaker Ethan Korpinen. Yappers, take it away.
Okay, welcome to episode 4 of the Film Yappers. If you were able to tune into our last episode, you might remember that we teased the 1981 classic known as Possession, kind of a cult classic. It didn't really take off upon release, mainly because it was banned when it came out,
That's right.
right
A
after its.
video nasty, right?
Yeah. That's what they were called in the UK. But yeah, right after its debut at the Cannes Film Festival, it was almost immediately banned, despite the fact that it kind of won some accolades. I mean, Isabella Adjani won the Best Actress award
Actress.
for a while. The original cut, I guess the director's cut was not even like available to watch. There was nowhere to find it for I think up until recently. I only discovered it I think back in like 2023 when I found it was like on Shudder. That was like the first like streaming platform that had it. I know that there are other ways to like watch it. You can maybe find like a copy of it on Vimeo or Dailymotion, one of those like streamers on Google and all that stuff. But it's a very hard movie to find. And it was almost impossible to find for a good while. There was like a 90-minute cut um that was released uh, for American audiences to see before the director's cut came out. And so, I mean,
That's
obviously, so
that's
many.
the one that I had seen
Right.
first time I saw it, and I really appreciate the longer one
Hmm.
more.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it feels besides just kind of like the cutting of certain scenes, because it's almost an entire hour shorter, but certain scenes are heavily like restructured. You have scenes that it's the ballet scene, that's the opening scene in the retooled cut. The scene where she's like being filmed while she's instructing this ballet
That's right.
class. I'm now going to get into what this film is actually about, which is not an easy task. It's not easy to really
Well,
describe.
wait a minute. This is a very straightforward movie
Of course.
about
Yeah.
a boy meets girl, boy falls
Mhm.
in love with girl.
It's very touching.
Some
Yeah.
stuff happens, and then monsters, and then pink socks, the Cold War in Berlin.
What we're trying to say essentially is if you're struggling to find a movie that's good for the whole family, search no further. It's Possession. We're kidding, by the way. This is not a film any kid or really anyone below the age of like 17 should watch.
I, I thought you were going to say
It'll
below
scar you
the
for
age of.
life.
I thought you were going to say below the age of 70, because
That too, maybe. Maybe
this
I was
film
too
is
young to see
is not
this.
necessarily suitable for anybody.
Uh-huh.
Um,
It's true.
because it's certainly a masterpiece, but in the same way that the most grotesque artwork you can imagine is a masterpiece.
Yeah,
Um, it's kind of a little bit of anarchy on screen. But
totally.
what I take away, and not to spoil anything, because you're going to tell us what it's all about.
Mhm.
Um, Either it's the best idea in the world or the worst idea in the world to make a movie while you're going through a painful divorce. It will either be the best thing to happen to your movie or the worst thing.
Yeah.
So, if you want to make a movie like Possession, you two need to have a divorce, a very messy, painful
Right.
divorce, and channel that rage in some
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and this is important for context too. The director Andrei Zulawski was in the midst of a divorce and a custody battle too
Mm.
while he was making this film. This feels like the most honest and sort of truthful and like raw depiction of whatever he was going through or whatever feelings he was battling during that time, just sort of depicted. So, yeah, essentially what this film is about, it's set in Berlin. It follows this spy played by Sam Neill, who in the opening scene returns home after this assignment, and he comes home to find that his wife doesn't love him anymore. And he kind of pries for more information because he wants to know, like, did I do something wrong? Like, have I not been supportive enough to you? And it goes from him being very introspective to like, okay, is there someone else? Which, of course, there is. This other man is Heinrich, who is a bit older than,
Mwah.
yeah. Very outlandish character.
And some of his performance is inexplicable. Like
Right.
you will ask yourself, what am I watching? What is he doing?
Mhm.
Why is he twirling?
His scenes at times
While
almost
he's
feel like they're ripped
saying it.
out of a different movie than the
Yeah.
one we're watching. But Sam Neill goes from, I guess, questioning his wife to he eventually hires a private investigator to follow his wife. And
Mhm.
this person tracks his wife down to this property, this other property that she owns. And he goes inside, and what he sees is more horrifying than anything you could possibly predict. If you're aware of certain types of anime, to put it lightly,
Ah, yeah.
there's definitely some connection between the creature in this film and that. So
And that and that. And
yes,
if
I'm
you
just going to
don't
call it
know what it
that.
is, you don't need to go looking for
Right.
it. And if you do know what it is, you already know what we're talking about.
It's called hentai, and it's art.
What's so interesting about this film is it changes genres many times. It's a very difficult film to lock down into a single genre. It starts out as kind of this typical like domestic drama, albeit at like a much more disturbing one than we're used to seeing. There's some, domestic abuse involved. So trigger warning for that. By the way, if you're, wanting to watch a movie like this, there's also some self-harm stuff that happens like in the first hour or so. Um, but what's really insane is like all of this stuff happens before this movie truly goes off the rails. So it already kind of has this very heightened tone from the beginning. The arguments are very physical. The first argument that we see between Mark and Anna is in this restaurant where he directly
Oh,
confronts,
yeah.
okay, who are you seeing? Like how is this going to affect our relationship, and I guess our like co-parenting of our son. Anna says something along the lines of, if I had met this person sooner, I never would have had Bob with you, their son, which is, I mean, one of the most crushing blows that someone in a relationship can hear from their partner. So Sam Neill, in this flurry
Well,
of rage, just kind of chases her around the restaurant, throwing chairs. He has to be restrained by a bunch of like the staff, like the chefs and stuff. They just tackle him. So I think it
mhm.
it, it almost kind of braces the viewer for the outlandish turn into sci-fi that it takes in the second half, because it gets very like Lovecraftian with the creature and stuff like that. It's one of those creatures where your mind like has to kind of fight to like understand what you're looking at, sort of. It's like, you
Yeah,
get it.
it's
Yeah.
very unclear what you're looking at.
Mhm. Yeah.
And multiple viewings, you'll probably, if you make it through more than one, you'll probably notice elements of that you didn't before. I think it's meant to be mysterious and
Mhm.
explicable. It makes you feel like you're suddenly watching a different movie
Totally,
than you
totally.
were before.
Hmm. Yeah.
But go ahead. If you want to tell us kind of the rest of the structure of the
Mhm.
movie, we'll go in depth on some of those scenes.
Yeah. So Mark's obsession with finding out what his wife is up to leads him from Henrik to uh hiring two private investigators that uncover this creature. So it's the
Who
viewer
who
kind of
happened to
is,
be a who happened to be a couple, which
yes.
is
Yeah.
kind
Yeah,
of
which felt kind of random, but I
really
think they were trying to
strange.
give some emotional weight to those characters that maybe wasn't already there on the
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good point.
So Sam, Neil, Mark visits him in person. Uh, he has a kind of a confrontation about him, like, how long have you been seeing my wife? And Heinrich says something like, I think like over a year. Heinrich's mother walks in during this altercation, and the two of them kind of pretend that they're having like a friendly chat as the mom is walking by, you know. But the second she leaves frame, it gets physical. Mark tries to attack Heinrich, and Heinrich just karate chops him, which is really funny. Just karate chops him in the throat with both of his hands. It's really funny. Anna was having an affair with Heinrich, and when that became, I guess, insufficient in fulfilling her desires, she started to have a second affair with this creature. And the really disgusting thing is, I guess, where it spawned from is from Anna, which leads to, I guess, the explanation of that leads to one of the film's most infamous scenes. This is the scene that like most people my age who are on social media have probably seen it once because I've talked about this film with many people who have not seen it, trying to like get them to check it out, you know? And when I say like,
Oh
have you seen
boy.
Possession? They're like, no, I've never heard of it. Like, who's in it, right? And the moment I bring up, it's that one film that has the scene where the lady's freaking out in the subway tunnel. It's like, oh, it's that movie. Like they know what I'm talking about suddenly, you know?
Yeah.
So that's actually how I discovered this movie. I saw some like Instagram reel of a woman just kind of flailing around with a bunch of grocery bags in a subway tunnel. I'm like, what on earth is happening? Like this, I have to see this movie. This is crazy. Which is
Yeah.
not what most people would think after watching that. But that's what made me want to check this thing out. It was my first exposure to this. It goes from this kind of messy domestic drama to just a flat out horror film creature feature. And people start to die. You know, the private investigator hired by Mark is killed by Anna immediately upon discovering the creature. She's very protective of it, right? And then the other detective, the first detective is the lover, right? Then wants to find out what happened to the detective that was killed, which leads him to Anna's place, and then he's also shot down or killed by Anna upon discovering the creature. So what's interesting is how Mark's relationship to Heinrich kind of develops throughout the film. You know, the first time he sees him, he's like, "Oh, you're just a douchebag who's screwing around with my wife, and you know, you're a homewrecker is what you are."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
because Bob, their son, seems to know who Heinrich is. I mean, I think he even calls him like Uncle Heinrich or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah. Uncle
total
Heinrich.
betrayal, right?
Yeah.
And basically the second time Mark sees Heinrich, Heinrich actually visits Mark, which is kind of unexpected. And the way he chooses to conduct himself in this scene or behave while Mark is trying to have a serious conversation with him is unorthodox, if I'm putting it lightly.
Like a David Lynch character that
Yeah.
got dropped into the movie, and you're looking around as you're seeing the movie and you're saying, why is he doing that? Why is he talking that way? Why is he twirling? There's always the twirling.
Yeah. And I don't know if
Um,
his character's supposed to be drunk in this scene, but he's certainly behaving that way.
it's not any human being.
Exactly. Yeah.
He was acting, you might say, possessed. But it's fascinating to watch. It's fascinating to watch.
Totally. Yeah.
But I
And
do I do agree with you, by the way. I maybe he's supposed to be drinking or on drugs or something.
yeah.
It's just hard to say this is a sober, clear thinking individual
Mhm.
in that
Yeah.
scene.
Well, I do think it's mentioned that he uh his character does drugs. I think that's why Anna formed like an emotional connection with him was he introduced her to drugs. And I think when that um no longer, I guess, satisfied her, she went from that to um making love with a disgusting abomination.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
The first scene, Mark is kind of like overpowered by Heinrich in their confrontation. Their confrontation gets very physical. Heinrich, beats him up, kicks him out of his apartment. The next time, Mark kind of stands his ground a little more. He even says something along the lines like, "I used to be afraid of you, but I don't think I am anymore." So each time Mark sees Heinrich, the sort of the power dynamic in their relationship changes a
It's
bit.
shifting. Yeah.
Totally, totally. Something I kind of picked up on Heinrich the second time I saw it. This didn't cross my mind the first time, but the second time I saw the film, I was starting to wonder that he might possibly be bisexual just because his interactions with, and I could totally be reaching here, right? But his interactions with Mark, it seems like Mark is all like, I'm going to kill you, you're sleeping with my wife and all that stuff. And Heinrich, doesn't really view Mark as like a threat.
Right.
He's oddly kind of like sort of friendly and
Oh
hospitable
yeah.
to him the
Yeah.
first time he visits him in his place. He's not
Yeah.
immediately like, get out, I don't want to talk to you. Like he's also very handsy with Mark too. Like he's kind of touchy-feely and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if he's trying to, and I could be way off here, but it makes me wonder if he's trying to maybe seduce Mark into possibly having some kind of
Oh yeah. Yeah.
way
Yeah. Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
with them and Anna and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
There's that kind of subtext I think is there.
Mhm.
And um Heinrich comes across you mentioned earlier. I think he's sort of what we think of the term doesn't quite mean the same as it used to, but he's what I think people used to refer to as swingers. He was a
Yeah.
swinger from like the 60s or 70s, that
Mhm.
kind of lifestyle. Austin Powers almost. In fact,
He
I kind
does
of think
like
of
a bit of an
Heinrich
Austin Powers
as
character.
David Lynch's Austin Powers. I mean, after all, this is a movie about spies, which is we haven't even gone into that. But what would you say, just to kind of put a button on this? What are your three favorite scenes that you've
Mhm.
mentioned the subway scene, which is kind of iconic.
I really like the scene where Heinrich discovers the creature. I'm not going to get into spoilers or anything, but it's actually I think the only scene that Heinrich shares with Anna on screen. Much of their
Oh,
relationship is
right.
described
Yeah, yeah,
by other
that's
by other people, either
mm,
Anna just talking about it with Mark, or Mark talking about it with Heinrich. I think Mark has like four scenes with Heinrich, and I think Heinrich only has one scene with Anna. But the scene when he discovers the creature just kind of sitting like in the corner um of like this empty room, and by the way, the creature's in a totally different position in that like and spot in this house than it was in the previous scene that we saw, which
right.
which almost makes me wonder, are there two creatures like instead of just one? But his immediate reaction to seeing that is he almost kind of has like a bit of like a mini seizure, like he kind of immediately
Yeah,
starts
yeah,
twitching
yeah,
kind of, and
yeah,
it
yeah.
feels like
He sees something that no man was meant to see. I think that's the point where, um, you know, Mark, Sam Neill's character, starts off the film highly rational, low affect, you know, until the, I guess the cafe scene where he starts throwing chairs around.
Mhm.
He's very rational, and he's slowly unraveling and becoming less and less rational through the film. Heinrich starts off very wacky,
Yeah,
but his responses to, and later in the film, his responses to the things that are going on are much more rational. I mean, I think the audience is like identifying with him at that point. He says, hey, oh, we've got to go to the police. We've got
Mhm.
to we've got to try to help Anna. We've got to do, and it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, that's what normal people would be
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Mark is kind of laughing
Like
at
I don't
that
care.
point, like,
Yeah.
oh no, this is great.
Because Heinrich not only discovered the creature, but he found like human body parts in her that she's been storing in her
Mhm.
fridge, and the body parts belong to the two private
Yeah,
investigators that she had
yeah.
already killed. So Anna's cray cray. She's crazy.
She
Right.
doesn't have an arc like the other characters.
Mhm.
She's bonkers and just becomes more bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say one of my other favorite scenes is um the initial, I guess, physical altercation between Mark and Anna. I think the acting in that scene is just, it's so powerful. I guess it's one of the few kind of heightened and exaggerated scenes of the film where I'm not really like laughing at it. I'm actually like just genuinely disturbed.
Yeah,
Because there's no science fiction element. This is before the creature is even introduced. And there's a shot in this scene. That whole scene is kind of, a sort of back and forth power grab between both characters.
mhm.
Mark has just come home after this uh kind of alcoholic binge that he was on. He was away for like 2 weeks. He, locked himself like in a hotel. This is after the restaurant scene, but we cut to him and he's growing a beard. Looks like he hasn't showered in like days. He's just drenched in sweat, and he has no idea where he is. And he kind of
Yeah,
just stumbles around, you know, just very confused. He's just kind of woken up in this stupor. He has no idea where he is. He just feels totally disassociated. But he comes home and he discovers that his son is home alone. His
totally
wife
neglected.
Anna's nowhere to be found. And by the way, fun fact, this moment was actually inspired
Oh,
by something that really happened during Andre Zawalski's divorce slash custody battle. He did
yeah,
actually
that's
walk home, go home one day to find that his son was just eating like this Dignus,
jelly out of a
like
jar,
a
right?
jar of jam, yeah, and just shoving it into his mouth and everything, because no one was looking over him. External chaos. It's almost kind of meant to reflect their crumbling marriage in a way. I mean, the Berlin Wall, that's a very important kind of for historical context, but also thematically, it really does represent the divide between two characters, both main characters,
Yeah, the
in the
alienation
midst of this
between.
custody battle, because not only are they totally alienated from one another, but both of them are using their son as kind of like a bargaining tool, which is really
Mhm,
screwed up.
mhm.
He's like, 4 years old and he has no idea what's going on, right?
Heinrich is in the middle between them. Heinrich's mother
Yeah.
is involved. Margit, the best friend, Anna's best friend, she gets involved, and her role is pretty inexplicable. And then one thing we haven't mentioned is the teacher, who
Yes.
happens to be played by the same actress that plays Anna. So
Mhm.
she's like a doppelganger, and she's this normal, sane human being. And we're sort of seeing kind of maybe a vision of what Anna could be if she were a
Yeah.
little normal. The teacher is very compassionate. In fact, she seems to be, besides Mark, it's the only one that really cares about Bob. And, she ends up taking care of him. She's his teacher at school. Doppelgangers are a big theme in the film. This east-west divide,
Right.
just like for a person, if they're going through a divorce, the whole world may be on fire. And this is kind of what seems to be happening, is their marital disunity is externalized on the whole world.
Yeah, it's
So it
it's
has its
creating this like
apocalyptic
event.
apocalyptic
Yeah.
to the end of the film. I wanted to point out that the creature design was the same guy who designed E.T. and worked on the Alien film on the Alien, and that's pretty
Xenomorph. Yeah.
significant. And
Resume.
the subway scene, which is the first thing to happen chronologically, but it comes near the end of the film, has been called the greatest example of physical acting in horror cinema. It's gotten all of these accolades.
Oh
And,
yeah.
uh, both of the actors mentioned that after this film, it took them a long time to recover.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Must have been physically exhausting, you know?
That they just were the psychological and emotional strain
Mhm.
that it put on them at Janie, Anna's the actress. She said it took years to recover from this
I
film.
can see that. Yeah. I mean, Sam Neill in an interview said that, he was asked to do certain things for this film that he would never have done again for anyone else for, any other role, right? Yeah, I think Isabella Janie's performance is, I mean, the best way I can describe it is, to me it feels like someone, like the acting equivalent of like someone grabbing you by the shoulders and just like shaking you like
Yeah,
aggressively. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what it felt like watching some of her scenes to me.
it's fascinating, and there are scenes where the tension builds, and then there are scenes where it's like, this is horrible, but I can't look away, and this
Right.
is actually kind of funny too.
Hmm.
Wouldn't want to be there, but watching it is pretty funny. And I'll even say that it probably has, and this is not a spoiler. Um, I'll leave this ambiguous, but it probably has the funniest suicide you've ever seen on film.
Yeah, it does.
If
It,
if
yeah.
there's such a thing as the most horrible tragedy you can imagine, and it's just pretty funny,
Yeah, yeah.
and
It's it's
it will catch you off guard
mhm.
because it happens so
It's so sudden.
abruptly, so
There's
abruptly.
zero hesitation, and I think for me, what makes it so funny is like it makes me think of that meme of like the old man kind of staring at the camera going like this, and the captain's like, "Okay, I guess I'll die," and it literally feels like that to me. It's like no
I
reason
think
for
of
this.
Larry David jumping out the window.
Yeah, there was no reason for this character to kill themselves, which is why I think it's so sudden you can't help but just almost laugh at it just to sort of
Yeah.
cope with it because it is so out of nowhere.
So if we haven't convinced you that you need to see this thing, that's okay. This film is not for everybody. Let's
Definitely
just
not.
put that out there. This is for people that like a little more of the transgressive side of a film. This is
Mhm.
not a family film. It's not going to make you feel good. Um, in fact, there's some people that probably shouldn't watch this if you're in a condition of fragile mental health. This is
Yeah.
probably
Or
not.
maybe going through a divorce, maybe don't watch this either.
Yeah. If you're
Chronically.
going through
Yeah.
marital problems, this
Mhm.
might not be the movie to
Yeah.
watch. But if you're in a solid psychological condition and you're willing to kind of look at something very extreme, it's very impressive. And I would even recommend, honestly, watching this with other people.
Yeah.
Maybe this is not a film to watch alone,
Mhm.
so that you can enjoy the madness together,
Yeah.
and follow the spiral down.
If someone watched the Heinrich scene, the final scene, even some of the interactions between Sam Neill and his other spy associates, if they
Oh
just
yeah,
watched those scenes on YouTube, they would probably think this is terrible. Like this is like the room levels of bad, Like what is this dialogue? It's a movie full of, characters that are speaking English, but it's not it is very much a European movie. I'll
yeah,
just say
yeah.
that. Yeah,
This is
in style.
the Europeanist movie ever ever.
Totally. It makes me think of that Werner Herzog, what he said recently in that 60 Minutes interview where he was recommending young aspiring filmmakers to like get more world experience, but like by working at like sex clubs and like
Oh
mental
yeah,
institutions
yeah.
and stuff. And I gotta say, if more young people who were aspiring to be filmmakers heeded this advice, we would receive a lot more films like Possession. I'll just say that. The title itself has multiple meanings, which I think is why it's one of my favorite titles in all of film. It has nothing to do with demonic possession, even though there are scenes where characters certainly behave as though they've been possessed by a demon.
There may be demons
Uh,
in the movie, but that's not
yeah,
the theme of the.
yeah, it's not like the main focus, but it certainly relates to the idea of possession within a relationship, how both parties have an idyllic version of um their partner. Mark basically kind of forms a bit of a relationship with the school teacher, who, resembles his wife, the doppelganger, because, she helps run the house. She takes very good care of their son when he's not around. It's kind of the version of Mark's wife that Mark would prefer Anna to be. When Mark starts to kind of behave a little more cocky and petty towards Heinrich, I think those traits are kind of reflective of the husband that, Anna wants from Mark. There's another thing I wanted to talk about was the camera work, 'cause I certainly think it's one of the highlights of this movie. It's very immersive. That's one of my favorite things about it. It places you in the headspace of its characters. When a character's like having a panic attack, you'll get this like really intense, like kind of 360 rotating shot. There's a scene where Sam Neill discovers the bodies of the two detectives that Anna killed, right? And it sort of jump cuts to him like in one of the empty rooms of this other property that Anna owns, and his like his whole world's falling apart, right? And then there are many like interesting POV shots too during certain argument scenes where it places you within the POV of the person being scolded by the other partner. Some
Sure.
really nice tracking shots. Like
Yeah,
you mentioned, the
yeah,
subway
yeah.
shot, the subway scene, which is like 4 or 5 minutes long, is all done in one continuous take. Really, really impressive and immersive camera work. But yeah, the last thing I wanna talk about, there is currently a remake of Possession, an American remake in development. It was announced last July, I believe. I know it was last summer, but Paramount Pictures have have obtained the rights to it. They've hired the director of both Smile movies. Robert Pattinson is the executive producer. He's not signed on to star in the film, although I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I
I
think
imagine he will. Yeah.
he would be a good choice, I think, for Sam Neill's part. I'm not sure who I'd cast in Isabella Janie's character. You really need an actress who's unhinged to pull that off. I mean, like Nicholas, you need like the female equivalent to like Nicolas Cage for that
Who
role to
is the
work.
female Nicolas Cage? We have to think about that for a
Yeah,
second.
Mia Goth might be good.
Who-
Mia Goth could be
Mia-
good.
Um, Firuza Balk. She doesn't act anymore, does she? I think she's retired. Who would be, see, that's the question of the night
Yeah,
is who is the female equivalent of Nicolas Cage? Um, and I can't think of.
neither can I. Yeah, there's got to be one. I mean, if you guys watching this can think of someone, feel free to
That's
drop
what you
that
need
in
to
the
put in the
comments.
comments down below. Yes.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'd love to know. And if you have like kind of a fan casting of who you would pick to play Sam Neill's part and Isabella Janie's part, feel free to share that as well in the comments.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Hater.
H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
Hater.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Huh? That's all you have to do.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
that wraps up our fourth episode. Hey, we made it to 3.
we
Remember
did.
that? Yeah,
We
on our
made it
first
to
episode,
3.
we'll call
That's
back there.
right.
Yeah.
A little bit
We get
longer.
to 3, that would be a huge milestone.
We've got to get to 3.
Yeah. We did it. We did it. We passed
Yes.
3 episodes.
In fact, as of the end of this episode, we will have gone double past my original
Yeah.
podcast of 2.
hmm
So we have several other films lined up in the queue. Not sure which one will be next, but it'll be one of the ones that we've been talking about. We may put that in the comments when we know which one we're going to do next. But thank you all for listening to this episode of the Film Yappers. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Film Yappers. We appreciate your support, which you can show by subscribing to the channel, clicking the thumbs up like button below, and sharing with your friends, neighbors, and cousins. We will see you on the next episode of the Film Yappers.